What we're going to do here, we have a little change of pace, is I'm going to serve as the start to initiate some questions for Dr. Joe relative to the program. Again, some quick background about the program, and then looking at what's the benefit? Why would a principal, having been a former principal, we're down to that bottom line, what are the benefits for the students, what are the benefits for our faculty and our school, and what kind of commitments do we need to make? And then where do we go from there if you are
Perfect.
interested in doing that? So, Dr. Joe, if I may call you Dr. Joe,
Absolutely.
be so informal,
That'd be
is
great.
again, start sharing some background about the program. How did you get into it, and
Okay.
what is the research that says that it makes a difference?
Perfect. Well, real quickly, I'm a former classroom teacher, university professor, school psychologist, special ed director, and more importantly, an applied researcher. So for the past 20 years, what I've basically been doing is looking at the research and then asking, how do we create curricular solutions and interventions that translate what the research is saying and put it into curricular activities and interventions that'll help the kids. And that's really how I came across Failure Free. I tried every existing program that was out there. I used phonics, I used sight, I used whole language, and yet I was still coming across clusters of kids who were not responding. Clusters of kids that basically it just didn't work with. So that's literally started me on a 20-year quest, and that quest has ended with the development of the Failure Free. But it's important to note that Failure Free is an ongoing development. Things that we're continuing to get feedback from the teachers we continue to use.
Okay. There have been some questions relative to some research. Florida Center for Reading Research
Yes.
has done some work in this area, and then there's been some extended research. So
Yes.
if you could share about that.
Okay, and that's, thank you, that's a good question, because I know some of you are saying, well, I read the Florida Center, and they had some questions about Failure Free. And one of the things that I have to point out is the notion that Failure Free does not fit into a conventional instructional model. We are, by definition, a viable alternative. So it means we're different. And the thing that makes us most different is the notion that we're now targeting kids that don't have a good ear for sounds. In my book, I use the phrase phonetically deaf. So what we're really saying is that there are some kids out there that just don't get phonics. They don't understand the process of skills initially, and they're kids that really need to be placed into the process first, and then they see where skills fits in. So when the Florida Center did the evaluation, one of the things that they said was, on face value, Failure Free has a lot of components in it that look good. But we don't know if they really are, because you don't have any alphabetics in there, and we're not sure as to whether or not that's going to be a good program. And one of the things that they then asked for was the results of the Power for Kids study. And the Power for Kids study is the largest longitudinal, at the time, the largest longitudinal reading research study in the history of the United States. It was led by the prominent national researcher here at Florida State University, which was Dr. Joe Torgerson. And what they did is they invited programs from across the country that had good data to show that they had promise to San Francisco for what was essentially a 24-program bake-off. We had 20 minutes to show our data, to show what we were, and then the national researchers, we had Shazwich at Yale, Marcel Jest at Carnegie Mellon, we had Dr. Torgerson. They looked at this, and then they selected what they call 4 programs that were going to be included in the in the study, which was, what can you do in 100 hours of intensive instruction with lowest performing 3rd and 5th graders? Failure Free was selected. More importantly, Failure Free was selected as the non-phonic intervention in the study. So even those researchers identified the notion that perhaps we better have something that might be a little bit different. Now, I know that one of the things that happened out there was the results of the study itself were mixed, the Power for Kids study. But I've got to clarify what happened there. And one of the problems that they had, particularly with the 5th grade cohort, was that by design this study was to deal with kids who were performing in the bottom 20% and lower. So we trained an entire cadre of teachers to work with the failure-free methodology that was specifically designed for that population. Well, they got 1 week into the program and they found that the kids that they had selected in the 5th grade cohort weren't lowest performing kids. Many of them were testing the 30th percentile, 40th percentile. And what happened was they were not doing well with failure-free because by design, failure-free was too low for the kids who were too high. So they asked us kind of midway, they said, Dr. Joe, would you do us a favor? I know this is out of the ordinary, but we've got to change. Can you come up with something that'll be different in a week for these higher performing kids? Well, we tried to do the best we could, and it didn't work. And the reality is when you look at our 5th grade results, they're terrible. But there was a condition as to why that occurred. So when you go to the 3rd grade results, which was lowest performing kids, kids who really did, then it really gets exciting. And let me just share with you this. The other 3 programs were corrective reading, read spell, PAT, and Wilson. And they were the phonic-based approach. They used 7 different measuring instruments that looked at phonemic awareness, phonics, sight word, fluency, and passage comprehension. Well, 4 of them were phonemic awareness and phonics. We don't teach phonemic awareness and phonics, so I could have told you, and they knew it themselves, that we weren't going to do well on that. So when they looked at the initial results for the 3rd grade cohort, what they basically found was mixed results. But the most important thing was that we had the highest impact in reading comprehension. What was even more exciting was when they presented the report to Congress, the 2nd report was designed to see what happens after treatment had been discontinued. And therefore, what they did then is they went back 1 year after treatment was discontinued and they looked at how the programs did. And failure-free was the only program to show growth in all 4 measurables. Comprehension, phonics, phonemic awareness, sight, word, vocabulary, and fluency. And I think that's pretty exciting. A lot of people don't know that. So long-windedly, we answered the question that was asked by the Florida Center, which was, does the program show impact as seen by the Power for Kids study in comprehension? And the answer is absolutely yes. But a lot of people don't know it.
There are numerous districts and schools in the state of Florida who have used the program over the last several years. And are you getting results from those? Are you getting any kind of research or any kind of data from that?
Yes, in fact, we're getting some really nice preliminary results that's coming out of the NEFEX study. And the NEFEX study was last year. It was the first trial. We were dealing with a more rigid population of chronic level 1 non-responders. And we're still in the process of going to each school as an exit interview. But what we're hearing is when we look at our target population, which is chronic level 1 non-responders, we are clearly moving the dial. And we're moving the dial very, very positively when we look at DSS, year-long growth, DSS, what they call catch-up growth, which is, as you all know what that is. And then we're looking at moving students from level 1 out of level 1. And remember, we're talking about kids who are chronic level 1 non-responders. Right now, we're pushing about 1 in every 4 out of level 1 entirely. And I think that's pretty exciting. Are we there yet? The answer is no. But one of the issues that we found when we were in the project last year was we started too late. We trained too late, and even though we've gotten all of this significantly exciting result, we did it really in less than half a year. So what we're looking for this year is to start immediately, get the training immediately, and get a full 180 plus days of intensive instruction under our belt.
As we know, many of the districts and schools that are tuning in today for this webinar have been struggling with working with their Level 1 and Level 2 students. And as you've indicated, the Level 2 students it's appropriate, the program sounds appropriate for some Level 2 students, but not all Level 2 students because they're Level 2 for a number of reasons. But as PACE has, as the staff here have pulled together the data, I know that the district staff and schools have also pulled their data in terms of how many of their students in the secondary schools are still Level 1 after lots and lots of interventions and much work by the educators to move them ahead and trying to create that. So as a former...
If I can interrupt for one thing, and because this is a genuine give and take, I've got a Christmas present for you. And I know that it is solidly in July, but I also have it to you, to all of the people that are listening. And that is, too often, there are two sets of victims that we see when we deal across the country with chronic Level 1 non-responders. And by the way, we're 20 years in the business. We have clocked over 1 million hours of intensive instruction with this population. So these are our babies. And what we find is there's really two groups of victims. One obviously is the student himself, but the second one is the district and the teachers involved and the principals and the administrators, because they have tried everything they know and it still doesn't come out. Here's my gift to you, and that is, you're not the problem. The problem is not with the teacher. The problem is not with the student. The problem is with the inappropriateness of the instructional material and approach as it pertains to this particular population. They are unique. Their needs are unique, and quite frankly, what we do with Level 1 students is not going to work with Level 2 and Level 3 without serious modification. So let us do what we do best, and let us do it the way we know how to do it. And while we're unique, we really do move that dial.
Okay. So continuing to move the dial, as a former principal, my question is, so what are the benefits? What would be the benefits of using the program with Level 1 students and with my faculty and the school? What would be the benefits of using your
Well, it's
program?
really exciting. The number one is no cost. Right? You're going to get a significant amount of materials, supplies, training
as a result of the
as a result of this appropriation. The most exciting thing is everything that you're going to get the first year, 90% of it is non-consumable, which means that once you have it and your teachers are trained, you're going to be able to use that material over and over and over. Now, the online component has a nominal, and I mean nominal, subscription fee that we do ask every year because we're changing. We bring things, it's right at around $100 a kid. When we're talking about the kids we're talking about, that is nominal. So that's the only ongoing cost that will be involved once we move forward with this. But you'll get enough material to work with large numbers of students in terms of curriculum materials, libraries that go in there. Number two, it's a relatively easy program to use. The lessons are scripted, but not scripted in the sense that you have to, we're asking the teachers to be robots. It's scripted only in the sense that because we deal with large numbers of schools across the country, fidelity is an issue. So we know that there are certain steps that have to be followed. It's an easy implementation. We're getting one-on-one results, but we're doing it in small to mid-sized groups. So it's a 3-station implementation. What we ask is very simple. We ask to have a 60-minute instructional period. We ask that it be dedicated to failure-free and failure-free exclusively. If you start putting additional programs in there, then that isn't going to work. We ask that we have one computer for every 3 students that are involved in the program, and we also ask that we have a high-speed internet connection. Then we want to be able to communicate very quickly and rapidly with the teachers, so we do ask that the principals and the teachers agree to do two things. Number one, to attend the training, and number two, to respond to the emails that we will be sending out to them over and over. But that's basically pretty easy to use, pretty easy to do, and very, very easy to fit into a scheduling situation. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. And it went on to the commitment by the school in terms of providing the teacher and having that teacher participate in professional development, and relative to the PACE member districts, trying to coordinate that and looking at a training the first week of August, a day of training, and then looking at, I believe, the third week of August, because most of our districts have their preschool planning then.
And then one of the things that we found after that was we will then have one of our team members come into the school about 4 weeks later to start working individually with the teachers, answer any questions. So you will have visitations. The other thing, because everything is online, and by the way, the software information industry has what is called its CODI Awards. And the CODI Awards are the equivalent of the Academy Award to the movie industry. You have to send out your software. It goes through a very stringent review process. And while we didn't win it, for 2 years in a row, we were one of the finalists in the CODI Awards because of our impact, because of the high speed at which we work. Everything on the screen talks, so students don't have to know how to read in order to learn how to read. And for high school students, that's extremely appropriate, because that means we can put them with age-appropriate material. No dancing bears and bunny rabbits. Dignity, pride, self-respect. Showing them that they can do faster, higher, and more. And having them work at a very, very excited period of time. You asked, what are some of the byproducts? One of our largest client base right now is Memphis City Schools. They're using us with about 200 teachers, close to 2,000 of their lowest performing students across the country, across their district. And they've been using us now for 3 years. This is what they're finding in the high school in particular. Two things. Number one, increased attendance rate. Kids are coming to school more. And these are the high school inner city kids. And then the second that I never expected to see was noticeable decrease in inappropriate behavior. What the teachers are seeing is the kids are on task, they are working attentively, and they are spending more time, and because they're on task, they can't be off task, which means they're not becoming disruptive problems, they're not being suspended as regularly as they did. And that's the exciting thing. In fact, time on task is something that's very, very exciting. We're seeing the research out of the University of Madison, Wisconsin, says that the lower the literacy level of the kid, the less time they can actively work independently by themselves. So they're 16 years old. They go into a class, the teacher is supposed to be working with them, and they're not working 5-6 minutes independently by themselves. Because of the variables that we control for, the repetition, the sentence structure, the story content, the 3-stage implementation, the fact that the teacher is a language teacher first, a reading teacher second, a content teacher third. There's a 15 to 20 minute pre-teaching lesson where she previews the material, introduces the vocabulary, reads that part of the story. We scaffold very, very entirely words to phrases, phrases to sentences. Smallest meaningful unit is a paragraph. When the kids leave there, when we use questions, what have you heard, what have you said, both factual questions and inferential questions, so we teach higher order thinking skills. The teacher models and reads that part of the story to them. So we're setting up what we call a failure-free instructional environment. By the time they leave there, they then go to the computer, and everything that they've been taught in the pre-teaching by the teacher is identical to where they are on the computer. And then when they leave that 15 to 20 minutes, they then go to paper and pencil activities. Now, because everything is so structured, and our kids need structure, our kids don't do well in an unstructured situation. what we start to see is a noticeable increase in independent time on task. And all of a sudden, we're starting to see these kids working independently with age-appropriate materials, not 5 to 6 minutes a day, an instructional period, but 40 minutes, 45 minutes. They're actively engaged, so they're increasing their reading volume rate. And because they're increasing their reading volume rate, they're improving. And I want you to ask you a few minutes about language, because we have that something that is very critical that I must stress.
Let's come back to that. I am sure that there are some folks out there that want to send in or have sent in an email or have called in some questions, and then also some folks would be interested in terms of if they're interested in getting additional information or if they're interested in making their intent to participate in this appropriation, what they need to do and how they need to do it. But let's see what questions they may have at this point.
And before we get to that, you triggered one more thing, and that is, I know that you all are having your conference tomorrow.
Right.
And Greg McIntosh and Patty Cannell, our two key members, will be in a booth there at the conference, so the people can stop by, they can meet Greg, they can meet Patty, they can have any questions that they don't have answered here, answered there. Okay. And they're very, very excited about meeting and discussing that with them.
And then we'll talk with our NEFAC partners in their member districts in terms of how your staff would also make connections with them to do any necessary follow-up.
Absolutely.
I don't know exactly, I'm sorry, I didn't look to see when their conference was, but, and I know all of us are trying to move very quickly to provide the information to schools as they're dealing with issues, the real issues like scheduling and the ticky kind of things that are tough to do in order to make success for students. And
Can I touch one issue also to the group about the whole notion of language and the notion of why we're providing a non-phonic approach and what we mean by a language development, a highly structured language development program. One of the problems that we've had over the past 20 years is that there are really two schools of thought in how to teach reading. There are the phonics-based skills approach, and then there are the whole language process people. Now, one thing I have to share with you is the opposite of phonics is not sight. So we're not saying that Failure Free is exclusively a flashcard-based program, because that just doesn't work. The kids, they don't need to learn isolated phonemic awareness skills that they can't apply, and they don't need to learn stacks of flashcards that they can't apply. Our definition of reading is gaining meaning from the printed page with fluency and expression. So if the kids are not reading with fluency and expression, then they can't do it. Now, one of the arguments that you hear over and over again is the research that was done on the exposure to words that students have when they're in school. And the researchers found that when they looked at the sheer volume of words that are placed in front of them in text, they found that kids were exposed to 5 million words in their academic career. And everybody said, well, you can't memorize 5 million words. And therefore, we need to find some type of mechanism, some type of way that they could, when they come to a strange word, they could use this mechanism to decode it, and then they could do that. And that's how phonics really came about. It was based on the notion that we had to have a viable alternative because kids clearly couldn't memorize 5 million words. But let me share with you the good news. When the researchers went back, and I know we're going to get to those questions in a second, but I want to get to this point. When the researchers went back and they looked at the 5 million words that were in this lake, they started to find that there were certain words that were popping up more than once. And what they found is that the 5 million words, while large in volume, weren't unique words. So what they started to do was to look at the unique words, and what they found was there were 87,000 words that composed, unique words that composed the 5 million. Now, that's still too much to memorize. But now here's where it gets exciting. Then the researchers went back, Shirley, one more time, and they looked at the 87,000 words, and they looked at what words were most frequently used. Are you ready for this? they found that there were 2,000 words that were most frequently used. Now, you would agree with me as a former professional that over a couple-year period, teaching 2,000 words is not difficult to do. I mean, it can be done, correct? You ready for this? When they master those 2,000 most common unique words, and I'm glad we're sitting down, by the way, they'll be able to recognize 90% of all of the words they'll see in grades 1 through 9. That's how redundant the English language is. Now, the beauty is the Failure-Free Reading Program teaches those 2,000 words in 27 stories and 270 lessons. That's incredible. Now, I know that vocabulary is starting to take hold throughout the state and in the country. Beck's work, Stahl's work, Snow's work, and it's important. But most of them are targeting what they call Tier 2 words. Words that are known by 40 to 80% of the readers. And that's good. But the assumption that most of the researchers have made is that the kids have already had mastery of those 2,000 most common. And that's not true for level 1 kids. That's where Failure Free has a diagnostic prescriptive that says, where are these kids? If they don't know the most common, we're going to teach that first. Then we have a program called Verbal Master, which then teaches the Tier 2 words. So we can run a full K-12 continuum, and that's what makes it so unique. But we do it within a fluency-based continuum.
Okay, we've got some questions here,
Okay,
it looks like.
good.
Let's start off with the question.
Now you're gonna ask me to read that.
Yeah, I'm going to ask you to do some reading here from one of our intensive reading teachers out there. It was noted that Failure Free is high school based, no bears, rabbits, or whistles. So is Failure Free reading demographically relative to students in our rural area?
Yes, in fact, one of the nice things in the opening slide is that Failure Free has been involved in sites rural and urban. So we are very comfortable with students who are in rural areas. We are very age appropriate, and the vocabulary that we use, whether it's urban or rural, are those most common words that kids have to know. But we're very comfortable with that. We have a very strong track record with that particular population. Sites in Kansas, in Oklahoma, in Nebraska, in South Dakota. We're very comfortable.
Okay. Here's another question. What products and resources will be available through this appropriation for our schools?
Okay.
You referred to some library.
Yes. What happens is there are really three programs that are going to be available to the schools. We have what we call our elementary series, but when we apply it to the high school, we have what we call our secondary solution, which is our core academic English reading vocabulary, those 2,000 words in 2 levels, what we call our orange level and our teal level. And then we go into Verbal Master, which is a highly structured language acceleration program that teaches critical vocabulary. Verbal Master 1 teaches 6th, 7th grade. Verbal Master 2 teaches 8th, 9th. Verbal Master 3 teaches 10, 11. And Verbal Master 4 teaches 180 of the most frequently used words on the SAT in order of difficulty. So they're clearly no childish material. We then use what we call the Kerrigan writing technique, which was developed at the University of Kansas Institute for Adolescents with Learning Disabilities, in which we teach them how to use these words, spell these words, and then how to write written composition. And that's one of the byproducts that we're hearing right now. Our kids are really scoring well on the FCAT writing component. Many of them are, is it level 4 and 5? They're doing well on that. So you'll get, and then the last thing we have for the kids who are transitioning out, who are your cognitively challenged. And by the way, ESE kids are our strength. So a lot of the kids that are using our level 1 kids who are in self-contained ESE programs, we don't shy away from that. We don't shy away from kids who are cognitively challenged. We'll work with clients with IQs as low as 35 and 40. And the third program that we have then is what we call our life skills program, which is a school-to-work transition program based on 4 age-appropriate themes: how to get an apartment, how to get a job, getting the facts on drugs, and how to get a driver's license. Mobile City Schools, for example, has adopted this for every high school in Mobile, Alabama, the life skills program. Our clients here in this project will have access to all 3 programs, and they will receive the curriculum libraries that go with that: teachers' manuals, flashcards, workbooks, paper and pencil reinforcement activities, an abundance of reading books, booklets. They get 6 copies of each, various stories, various themes. Then they get the talking software, which is all of the online, the diagnostic prescriptive, and the training that goes with it. Did I answer all those questions?
You did.
You get it. I'll tell you.
I'll tell you
the truth of the matter is, you get more stuff than you know what to do with. And the beauty is when we go, you keep it.
And you also mentioned obviously the professional development as a component of this, and you also referenced that some of your staff will also be doing follow-up throughout the year.
The biggest thing that we found was the notion that while it's relatively easy to use, the teachers have specific questions. We're going to look at how to grouping. We're going to look at how to use the material in the most efficient manner. We're going to answer any questions that they might have. We've got a good track record here, so we know how to get it up and running and do it quickly. But I'll tell you what you're going to see in a relatively short period of time, and I'm looking right into that camera. You're going to see kids, and principals, you know who I'm talking about. You're going to see kids who you are most concerned about, who you have lost hours of sleep. You're going to see changes in their performance and confidence level that's just going to excite you. I mean, I just don't know what else to say. It's that change in attitude and confidence that's just amazing.
Let's go back for
Later
a
on,
moment.
I'll speak passionately.
Okay, I know. You just need to get
Too laid
excited
back.
about this. You made reference to students who are cognitively challenged.
Yes.
And there was a specific question that came in. It says, do you have any information or data results that is specific to students with disabilities?
Yes. In fact, my background is special ed. Okay, I was a former special ed teacher when I was at the University of South Carolina. I was involved in the graduate program at the University of South Carolina. Expertise was severely learning disabled and cognitively challenged and behavioral emotionally handicapped kids. What we're finding is that we are really impacting those level 1 kids. We are seeing significant changes in their performance. They're on task behavior. Another population that we're working very strongly with is with schools for the deaf and hearing impaired. In fact, Failure Free now is in 1 out of every 5 residential schools for the deaf across the country, and growing rapidly because of the fact that we're obviously non-phonic. And by the way, our longest and our most vocal supporter is the Florida School for the Deaf. And Florida School for the Deaf has used us now for the past 5 years with their special needs students as the school, our Life Skills School-to-Work Transition program for their special needs deaf students at their high school. So I think that's a pretty good track record. And one more thing, it's one thing to say you have research. It's another thing to say that your research is of such quality that if submitted to a blind peer review, it would be accepted in a national or international journal. Now, I'm going to say this. A lot of publishers present themselves as having that data. Ask them to hand you their independent journals, and you'll see you're going to get about 1 or 2. Failure Free at this moment in time has 9 published studies in international journals, ranging from the Journal of Learning Disabilities to the Australian Journal of Learning Disabilities. And let me share with you something that came out of the Power for Kids study. They did brain imaging research. Marcel Just at Carnegie Mellon and researchers at MIT scanned the brains of the poor readers and then looked at the kids who were involved with the program. And what they found was that there were noticeable differences in the brain images of the poor readers. There were areas that were clearly underdeveloped. They then went back 1 year after the program had been discontinued to see residual effect. Are you ready for this? They couldn't find a noticeable difference any. This has gotten international recognition because this is the first study to ever show that intensive reading intervention actually rebuilds white cortical brain matter in that of poor readers. I think that's pretty exciting. And one more thing, we've done studies in which when schools still use the discrepancy model between IQ and achievement, and as you know, and I'm looking directly to my ESC teachers and special ed directors, sadly that discrepancy over years doesn't get smaller, it gets larger. We did 3 separate studies, and this is the article in the Journal of Learning Disabilities, where we looked at the discrepancy between IQ and achievement, Wechsler Intelligence Scale for Children, Woodcock-Johnson Passage Comprehension. What we saw was that prior to treatment there was a discrepancy between where they should be and where they were of 15 points or higher. In 3 separate studies, that discrepancy went to under 5 points and in some cases under 3. 67% of the kids that if they were tested again for services wouldn't qualify. I think that's a pretty exciting statement.
Pretty dramatic. We're going to keep chugging through these
These
questions
are great.
we want. What's the cost of the program to our schools?
It's a terrible cost. 0, nothing, nada. But I want you to know that you're looking at getting initially about a cost of between $10,000 to $15,000 is what it would be retail in that initial first year. And that's because we're adding so many curriculum libraries. In other situations, the cost is generally to get started in $5,000 to $10,000. But that will be no cost. And that material will stay in your school. And if the funding is no longer there, the only additional cost in years going forward would be the $100 a student for the subscription. Is that clear?
That's for the online subscription.
That's right.
Okay. You referred to this earlier, but the question is, what size classes do you recommend? You may not have said this on air.
I'd like to keep a 15-to-1 ratio, but I can play with it. I don't really want to go higher than the low 20s, and I'll work with the district on that. We may need a few more computers. I'd like to have that 1-to-3 computer to student ratio so that we can have 3 groups of about 5 kids. We're real comfortable in groups of 5 to 7, and we'll show the classroom teacher how to ability group them, their kids.
Follow-up question to that is, how long is the instruction time we must dedicate to failure-free reading each day? We need
what I'm hearing, we can do it as low as 45 minutes a day. But I really would like to have a 60-minute instructional period. So if you can give me that, I'll be very, very happy. I can go as high as 90 minutes. So if you have a 90-minute instructional block, that's not a problem whatsoever. Look, everything that we're going to do is designed to accelerate. We want to do faster, higher, and more.
Okay. This question comes in on an email. It says, will the teachers viewing this morning get an opportunity to view, review, or preview exactly what failure-free reading is and what it does? Are we able to get samples so that reading teams in the school can discuss the materials, pros and cons, etc.?
The answer is you're going to have to trust us. And the reason why is the biggest thing that we're fighting right now is time. What you've just asked is something that takes too long to do. We've got a good track record. what we can say is if you can have your decision makers meet either Greg or Patty in the booths tomorrow and the next day at the conference, that would be the best. Greg McIntosh and Patty Cannell are willing to come out to your school to giving the restraints of time. So we'll try to work with you, but generally we're not in a situation where we can give you the luxury of review. I promise you we won't let you down. What, did that answer the question?
You also have a website, I'm presuming?
Yes, you have a website. We can download some material for that if they would like to do it. I believe that I can also download if they want or give them a link to a webinar in which I have an overview of what failure free is. So we can send links to that.
Okay. Also, we're so close to school starting again.
Yeah.
How can this program work effectively when the training is required and be done at the beginning of the school? We have students who will test again on FCAT in about October. How can it help them with this time constraint?
Okay, we're not a miracle worker, but what we are finding is that, number one, we can get you started yesterday. So that's not the issue. That's the thing we're trying to do. The training is very, very easy to do. It's very quick to implement. We can move in a very, very short period of time. And that's why we're setting the training dates that we're doing on that. What we're finding is that we're getting some nice results for kids who are in summer programs, 4 weeks, 6 weeks, that we're seeing some really positive growth in that short period of time. The more time we have with them in the program, the greater the chances that we're going to impact them on FCAT.
Okay.
And by the way, in NEFEC, we've had a couple of situations where we have seen DSS growth scores of 700 points and higher. That's not 700 points, yes. And one of those was an ESE kid.
This question is, how do you think this program will impact our FCAT scores this year, seniors reaching graduation and being able to graduate?
Well, that's our goal. Our goal is to move them off the dial. Here, I'm going to answer the question with a question, and the question is, what have we done in the past? Are you ready for this? You know how hard you've tried. You know how hard you've worked. You know that what you've done isn't impacting all of the kids. There are over 72,000 students sitting in Florida classrooms today who are chronic level 1 non-responders. They have never gotten off of that dial. Now, if we can bump them either 1 out of 4, think of what that's going to do. But that's not our goal. Our goal is to move them as quickly as possible to their potential. Okay. Did that answer the question?
Yes. This question is, can the program be used in a block schedule?
Yes, it can. We can work very comfortably with that. All you have to do is tell us your parameters and we'll work with you. Look, I know the most difficult thing that a high school principal has more than anything else is scheduling. They lose sleep overnight. And they don't lose it one night, they lose it over months. So we're designed to work in conjunction with that. But it's my understanding that there is an intensive reading block that's built into the school districts, and that's where we see ourselves fitting in. What we're asking, though, is to get as close to a homogeneous group as possible, which is your chronic level 1 non-responders.
The other end of this question is, or another question, but that's the other end of the issue is, how do we adapt the program to a 50-minute period?
That's not a problem. That we can do that standing on our head. Okay. All we're going to do is take the 50 minutes and break it into three, into 3 segments. Okay.
And the last question that we have that has come in, it's a multi-part question, is failure-free reading generic-based, or is this program directly related to Florida? And what this person is indicating, does it utilize the Florida benchmark Sunshine State standards, and is this program in addition to the requirements of the Florida benchmark and Sunshine State standards?
Don't know what the last part was, but the answer is, do we correlate? The answer is absolutely correct. It is, we teach what we call, the key here is that what we're trying to teach is critical vocabulary that our students must know in order to not just memorize it within the failure-free, but to transfer that. So failure-free is, the stories are composed out of what I found was the EDL core vocabulary list. The EDL core vocabulary list is the most researched vocabulary list in America today. What they used was 160 sources, not only found in Basel, but also found in science, social studies. Then what I did is I took the EDL core vocabulary list and I did it for first grade, second grade, third grade, and created stories based on that. Now, why is the EDL core vocabulary important to this question? The EDL core vocabulary, and we're teaching mastery of it in a meaningful, as close to authentic text context. But when students get mastery of the EDL core vocabulary, that is the vocabulary that the developers of FCAT used when they created FCAT. So the answer is it has broad applicability to all of those 160 resources being used both in Florida and across the country. And more importantly, it has specific applicability because this is the terminology and the vocabulary that the kids are being measured on through FCAT.
Okay. The next question from this same person is this program all computer-based? So you may want to elaborate because there is an online piece to that subscription.
It's a three-stage implementation. And what we use is, what the research has shown is that our kids do best in what's known as MEMC, multiple exposures and multiple context. And what basically we found also is that our kids do not, that the problem that we find is not, as I said, with the teacher, and it's not with the student. It's with the inappropriateness of the instructional material as it pertains to this particular population. The assumption is that all materials are in their simplest form. My research has indicated that our kids, level 1 kids, must have simultaneous access to 3 sources of information within the actual material itself for them to be successful. So they have to have material that is repetitious, they have to have material that controls for sentence structure, and they have to have material that controls for story content. Now, if you don't mind, repetition is the single most important criteria for our kids. We have known since 1930, and this was the work of Gates, which was then replicated by Hargis at the University of Tennessee, who is also a good friend of mine. We have found that as the literacy level of students decrease, the need for repetition proportionately increases. So when you have clients who are 12th graders reading at a first or second grade level, they need to see material at least 50 to 75 times before they can recognize that independently. Traditional material might introduce a word in one part of the story and they don't see it again at the end. The word density ratio is too low. Failure-free controls for that. That's why we're so repetitious. That's why we're so redundant. But it's also the reason, as we were talking this morning, why we place them at frustration level. Because if we were to take a 17-year-old kid reading at a first grade level and put him at his independent reading level, and he saw it and he heard it and he said it and he went from the teacher lesson to the computer lesson to the paper and pencil activities, and reinforcing the same thing over and over, he would kill the teacher. Or the teacher would go nuts. That's why repetition is boring. However, when you use a diagnostic prescriptive model and we place them at frustration level, and they're at the point where they say, right from the beginning, this is too hard, I can't do it, then repetition no longer becomes boring, it becomes the mother of learning. So we use MEMC, multiple exposures and multiple contexts. 15 to 20 minutes, small group, language-based. And we teach our teachers right from day one. You are a language teacher first, you are a reading teacher second, you are a content teacher third, and you can't change the order. And the reason for this is important. And I know I'm using my finger and I'm pointing into the camera, but I don't care. I don't care what you tried to do. You may be a 12th grade English teacher, and you may be mandated by the state of Florida to have those students read at a 12th grade level. But those students will never read at a 12th grade level no matter what you're doing if they're sitting in your classroom with the 2nd or 3rd grade vocabulary. Students cannot read for meaning above their language level of comprehension. The key to comprehension is vocabulary, and we are a highly structured language development program designed to pick them up at their frustration level and take them higher. So it's multisensory, abundant material. We are not exclusively a software. Software is about 1/3 of the program.
So the computers and the computer experience with the software and the curriculum is one piece of it. Small group is another piece, and then there's an independent.
Paper and pencil activities, everything, multisensory. It is a 3-stage implementation, teacher-led small group where we're going to go over the words. Today's, we're going to go over this part of the story. Here are the words that you're going to read. Let's go over these words. Do you know what these words mean? Listen as I read this part of the story. Let's, who would like to read it back? Now let's go to the computer. The computer will reinforce what I just taught there. Then we'll go to the paper and pencil activities. Is it overkill? Absolutely, for most kids, but not for ours. And it is an overkill if we're at frustration level. Now, I'll tell you what we're going to find in the beginning. There are going to be some teachers in your class that are going to say, my kids are bored. And you know what we're going to say? You're right, because we've looked at your material. And that's one of the beauties too. Because you're online, we can go up and we can look at every student's performance. So we don't have to be there, but we can answer questions. And I can say, I'm looking at the student's performance, I'm looking at what we've asked the student to do and what they've done, and I'm seeing here that there's not one error made in the student. What this tells me is it's too easy. And your student is bored because it's too easy. You know what our antidote is? Bump them up 2 levels. Move them up higher. Move them to the challenge level. So that's what we are. Not a remediation program. We are an acceleration program. We are going to push this envelope every moment. Now I am getting passionate. We're underestimating the ability level of our kids. Change the program, you change the kids.
Well, here's someone who's asking what they need to do next after the broadcast is over to get the materials and begin to plan and implement the program when school begins. So we know that for the PACE member districts of people who are going to be able to attend the leadership conference this week at Bay Point within a day or two, that you'll have staff there.
Absolutely.
In addition to that, folks can, we will get a site for the NEFECT.
Yes. And PACE people.
And PACE, who are, and the PACE individuals who are unable to attend the conference, so that there can be communication.
Yeah, and the key person here is Greg McIntosh. Greg is our representative both in NEFECT and PACE. They can send information. They can call at 1-800-542-2170. Request that Greg contacts them. We'll do that. But all of that information will be sent to the people who are listening as we speak.
So we'll have permission to put Greg's contact information
yes, in fact, he's asked
on the
that.
screen
Yeah.
so that people can funnel their questions, whether they're a member of PACE or our sister consortium.
Yeah, and can I say one more thing? I hope that there are some ESE directors out that are listening, and if you're not, if you've got building principals, talk to ESE directors. Our strength is ESE. I mean, those are the kids that we really work with, and we work best with. So if you've got kids in self-contained classrooms, kids that are being asked to take FCAT, those are our kids. And we've got we have broader flexibility this year than we did last year in terms of the kids coming into the program.
we'll ask you to write down this, this information so that we can get it up on the screen.
Well, actually, I have nothing to write,
Oh,
so
okay,
we're just going to
okay.
have to get it back other
Okay.
than Greg
We'll put it-
McIntosh.
Okay, and we'll get that information. This is a person who had previous questions. She said your explanation really helped on the three-stage implementation. And she says, you said core vocabulary, so is this vocabulary based? And how will this correlate with the comprehension piece, especially when reading is gaining meaning from the printed page?
Well, I'll go back to my whole statement. You cannot read for meaning above your language level of comprehension. So what we're finding is, and especially as it pertains to level 1 kids, the current body of research that is out there, a lot of people don't know this. The current body of research is done by researchers who are working primarily with average kids. At best, they're working with some kids who are in that 1 standard deviation plus or minus, 68%. Y'all remember the bell-shaped curve. The kids that are 1 standard deviation, that carries about 68% of the kids. You go out 2 standard deviations, you're moving into about 95%. Researchers aren't there with kids who are in that 3rd standard deviation. That's where your level 1 kids are. That's where your ESE kids are. That's where Failure Free is unique. You look at the other programs that are out there, they don't deal with this population. We start there and move our way in. So we're not afraid to go to the extremities. We work our way in. Once we get into the point where the kids don't need us, you already have the programs in place. But you cannot read for meaning above language level of comprehension. What makes it unique, though, is that we're not a flashcard-based program. What we're designed to do is to always put that vocabulary into words to phrases, phrases to sentences, sentences to paragraphs. We teach a paragraph each day. By the end of 2 weeks, they're reading a 12 paragraph story. Then they move on. So everything is always in a reading literacy based connotation. Does that make sense? Do you think I answered that?
This person was asking the advantage of the program for developing the vocabulary skills. This individual
One more thing again. One thing that we also train our teachers in is the notion of, a lot of times people are measuring fluency on the basis of word gained per minute. That is not my definition of fluency. Fluency, by definition, is being able to read with expression. If you are reading with expression, you are comprehending what you read. And by the way, I also want to share with you, one of our biggest proponents is Dr. Jay Samuels. And I don't know if your people know who, all of them might not know who Dr. Samuels is, but Dr. Jay Samuels, number 1, was the co-chair of the National Reading Panel. He was the one that was responsible for comprehension and fluency. And he's also the person that coined the phrase, he is the father of the phrase automaticity. So Dr. Samuels has looked at this. Another person who was a big proponent was Albert Brigance. Brigance building reading, Brigance inventory of basic skills. Sadly, we lost Al last year, but he is a big proponent. Another person who has reviewed the program positively for the state of Ohio is P. David Pearson, Dean, College of Education, Berkeley.
Okay, we're coming up on our last questions, I think. What is the lexile level of most of the passages? What they're really trying to get at is the complexity on the test, and how often do they read a 10th grade reading level?
Well, not all students will read at 10th grade reading level, and that can be an ancillary material activity that you can build into the program. Again, we're designed to work in conjunction with. The methodology, however, can be used to show teachers how to make inconsiderate text more considerate, especially text written at a 10th grade level is inconsiderate for the most part. We control for variables that have never been controlled for, which is sentence structure, story content, repetition, abundant use of pronouns, uncommon names, dates, and places. So we're targeting kids, frankly, if they're reading at a 10th grade level, they shouldn't be with us. See, and that's my whole argument. Too many people we're not there. We're talking about your chronic, we're talking about I'm pulling my hair out at the roots, I don't know what to do with, this kid is driving me crazy, kid.
Because of frustration.
Because of their frustration.
Trying to find something
Reading
that
at best a
matches.
first, second, third grade level.
This last question is, again, emphasize your staff's availability to be with schools and districts throughout the process.
24/7, you can reach us at any time. If you have an issue in your building, you can call us immediately. You will have a response within 24 hours. If you need somebody there, you'll have somebody there within 48 hours. Okay. I guarantee that.
Okay. And the staff just wanted us to know that, and I wanted you to know that we can make this webinar and information available to you if requested, and also on our website. We will get the contact information for Greg McIntosh to have that on there.
Yes.
And we so appreciate your
Yes.
participation and your patience this morning as we went through to make sure that all of the communication came your way.
And if I could sum it up, I want to look at this. Look, we are not the best thing since sliced bread. We are, however, a viable alternative for those kids who are drowning in your classrooms. Are we going to be all things to all kids? No. Are there people out there who don't like us? Yes. But I don't care, because what I primarily care about is helping those kids. And if that's what I need to do it, I'll do it. All I want you to know is we want to help you help those kids who are pulling your scores down. These are the kids that are going to kill your year-end performance reviews. These are the kids that if we don't move them up, no matter what you're doing in the other areas, you're going to be judged on. I'll leave you with this statistic. For every 6 kids you have testing level 1, you need 13 kids testing level 4 just to compensate for what those kids are going to do to your reputation. Forget them. Now, if we can bump those kids out of level 1 into 2 and 3, it's a win-win. Are we the best thing since sliced bread? No. But do we do what we say we're going to do? Yes. And if we don't, you're going to see my face in your district.
Again, we thank you for your participation and patience, and we certainly thank Dr. Joe for being here and providing information. We thank the Florida Legislature for their appropriation
Senator Wise.
for the
Senator Wise's
involvement with this.
Magnificent person.
For the member districts of NEFAC and Panhandle Area Educational Consortium districts. Both the NEFAC and the PACE staff members will work with Dr.
Lockovich.
Lockovich. Thank you. To get the research that you need and get the information that you need to make sure that it's a smooth implementation and serves your students and faculty well. Again, thank you and have a great day.